Hi everyone, Charles from the Food People here. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. It's my great pleasure to welcome Mex Ibrahim, co-founder of Women in the Food Industry. We're going to be talking all about women in the food industry, its purpose, the challenges and opportunities for women in food, but also the barriers to be addressed, but also some of the many trailblazing women that are doing incredible things in food and drink. Welcome, Mex. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks so much for inviting me. Really pleased to be here.
Thank you. Just a little bit for those of you that are joining this podcast series for the first time. At the Food People, we're very clear about why we do what we do. We're champions of change driven every day by our intent to shift the future of food and drink by harnessing the power of trends. And this In Conversation With series is all about talking to people, and brands and businesses and entrepreneurs across the food and drink spectrum to find out more about why they do what they do and how in their way they're championing change and shifting the future of food and drink. So Mex, it's great to be speaking to you today. Let's dive in. Let's just start at the top and tell us a little bit about you and what you do and how you define it. And I'm saying how you define it because I've heard you define it in various different ways before. So I'm going to let you tell us what you do and how you do it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Charles. I'm Mex, co-founder of Women in the Food Industry, and we are a community interest group or a social enterprise which is trying to further women's equality in the food industry. And by the food industry, we're talking about the entire industry here. So not just hospitality, not just chefs. We're looking at food producers. We're looking at female farmers, looking at women in the drinks industry. We're looking at female food photographers, food policy, nutritionists, women across the entire industry. And in the main, most of those sectors that I've spoken about, women are in the minority. There's a few where we're probably a little bit more equal, nutrition being one of those. But what we are finding is that women in senior positions are still very much in the minority.
Right.
So our aim at Women in the Food Industry is to help show that there are lots of roles and that it is still a great, vibrant, amazing place to be, and is also one of those industries where if you are trained in one aspect, you've got skills which are really easily transferable to others. So, for example, if you trained as a chef, you could easily become a development chef, or you could potentially look at things like nutrition, or even go into food production and trade yourself, and certainly write a book. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect and the other part of our major mission is to make sure that women rise up to through the industry. Because what we are finding, and that is much more across the board, across all verticals, is that women are not reaching the senior positions that we feel they deserve.
Okay. We're going to touch on, there's lots of different elements in what you've just introduced there, and we're going to touch on many of those elements in our discussion. But I'm quite interested, before we do that, just how did you get to this point? What has been your journey and career? And I guess that at some point there was a founding inspiration for women in the food industry. So I'd just love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So I started professionally in the food industry in 2011. And I was head of social media and marketing for the big food website, Great British Chefs. So I worked there. I was literally their first head of marketing and social media when the company founded in 2011. And I stayed until 2019. So I was there virtually 8 years. And in that period of time, did a lot of digital marketing, did a lot of community stuff around food, obviously, and recipes and chefs. So in that period of time, I met a huge amount of amazing chefs, from Michelin-starred chefs right through to great development chefs, great people working in the food industry from the production area, because we were doing lots of digital collaborations with producers, big collaborations with retailers such as Tesco. We built apps for them, recipe apps and Cardo. And also we did a lot, because I was there for 8 years. We did a lot of quite innovative stuff. So we crowdfunded a cookbook
Yeah.
We started this amazing Facebook group, which was our Facebook Cookbook Club, which when I left had about 30,000 members in it. We won countless awards for our social media and for our innovation as a website. The company was kind of 50-50 male-female because it's predominantly an app and a marketing-led company. So marketing tends to attract lots of women, and women do very well in marketing, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
My background is completely marketing, predominantly, well, in latter years, digital marketing, but I started off as a very traditional marketer, and I worked for companies like Film, Mills and Boon, Book Tokens, very, very traditional companies. But I've always had an interest in direct marketing, and that obviously led to my interest in digital. That's kind of like the way of taking that book further. But in the time that I was there, we got thrown at us quite a lot. Why do you not have many women on your website? And you're like, kind of like, well, we are representative of the industry in terms of chefs. Very small proportion of women at the time, particularly when I started, had Michelin stars. You could literally count them on one hand.
Yes.
It was that low.
Yeah.
So we had all of them. Well, I think maybe we didn't have a couple, but we had most of them. So that was always kind of an issue for us. And we as women, and even the men in the group, were like saying, yeah, it is an issue, but we're trying to reflect what's actually out there. Unfortunately, what's out there isn't very equitable. But we did manage to change things because we decided to, well, through speaking to our investors, because it was mainly our investors were very keen on us just having Michelin starred chefs and the like on our site, was that we knew that was A, cutting us off from lots of other women, and B, cutting us off from lots of other chefs and food writers and people with interesting stories in general.
Yeah.
So we opened it up very much to include food writers and food bloggers, and people that didn't have Michelin stars, but were still doing incredible things. Our premise was always about food with a story. It wasn't just showing the recipe. It was always showing story and the background behind that, because we were always aware that people who love food want to know, real true foodies want to know as much about food as possible, and that's what we did with Great Chefs. So when we opened it up, it meant that I was dealing with a lot more women, which was also great, and it meant that I got to know like a huge amount of women in the industry. And the catalyst, I suppose, to setting up women in the food industry was very much about one of my inspirations, which you might even be asking me about later on, but I'll say now, is Asma Khan.
Yeah.
Who, as I'm sure most people know, is the founder of the amazing restaurant Darjeeling Express. She was the first UK person to be on Netflix's The Chef's Table, which is a fabulous Netflix series which focuses on one particular chef in every episode, and she was the first Brit to be featured. And coincidentally, that happened in the month that she was our cook. That her book, Darjeeling Express, her first book, was our Facebook Cookbook Club book of the month. So it was, we knew, we were sort of hearing rumors that she was going to be on it, but we didn't know exactly when. And literally, we started with her book in November 2018, and mid that month she was on The Chef's Table on Netflix. So for her it was great, because obviously Netflix changed her life and her career completely. But as you know, she obviously didn't really know exactly by how much it would be changed. So, and because of the sort of person that she is, she really embraced what we were doing at the Cookbook Club. So just in a nutshell, the Cookbook Club basically looks at one cookbook every month, and everybody from the community cooks from it. And the community was large, so anyone that was in the Cookbook Club at the time and is still in it now will see like hundreds of people making their recipes all of the time. And normally with cookbooks that doesn't happen. You might get a review from a journalist or something, but you won't normally get absolute, like, real sort of normal critiques on your work.
No.
And if you embrace it, which Asma did, and a lot of our other chefs did, I mean, we had people at the time, people like Marcus Waring, Yotam Ottolenghi, Chantal Nicholson, Peter Gordon, Jeremy Pang, loads of like really high profile chefs took part in the club. And really those, really embraced it, because they were A, amazed at how many people were in it, and B, amazed at how many people were sharing. So Asma had the opportunity to say, not only am I on Netflix, but I've also got like hundreds of people cooking for my book. And here you can see them, here you can go on Facebook and see what they are saying about my products or about my recipes. So consequently, we became, really good friends in that period of time. She invited me to the opening, when the show was launched, at her restaurant. No, in fact, it wasn't even at her restaurant. I think, can't remember exactly where it was, but I know that Cobra were under sponsors. So the first screening of Chef's Table on Netflix. And she was chosen because her restaurant was, and probably still is, one of the first restaurants where all the chefs are, and all of back of house is female.
Yeah.
And not just female, but female from a sort of like slightly older perspective. So women who have come into the industry, in their 40s and 50s, and have not necessarily had the traditional training. She hadn't either. She came from a more sort of academic background, but had always wanted to try to open a restaurant. So in that respect, she managed to get a restaurant in Carnaby Street, but it wasn't an easy ride. She had to try and get funding for it. She had no experience in running a restaurant before. She had run supper clubs. She had no experience in running a restaurant before. But she managed to, with her sort of general grit and determination, get some funding, and the restaurant was, really successful then, because she had loads of reviews from people like Dave Mashler and Grace Dent and others. But obviously, since Netflix, people like Hollywood movie stars were going to visit, and lots of Hollywood movie stars were going to visit. Like, people like Paul Rudd, Keira Knightley, are often seen, and even now, oh my goodness, who's the guy who I've literally forgotten his name, the guy from Schitt's Creek, Dan Levy, is a regular customer there. So whenever he's filming in London, he always goes to Darjeeling Express, and there's always like massive pictures. Yeah, but she wanted to use the great thing about her is that she's not just content with thinking, oh, this is amazing, my life's changed, good for me. It's always about giving back. So she wanted to use that fame that she got to help other women.
Right.
And that was where she was really, really helpful to us when we started up Women in the Food Industry. And she always quotes the famous quote from Madeleine Albright from the US, which is, there's a special place in hell for a woman that doesn't help another woman. And that really stuck with me, forever, and still will, and is still kind of ultimately the mission behind Women in the Food Industry, because we believe that together we can all help each other. It's not a case of like one person or a few people at the top and just looking at them. It's a case of everybody grouping together and collectively helping each other. And women are really good at doing that. Men are as well too, but in a slightly different way. So we do it because it's kind of like the sisterhood, and it's like, really, we've got to help each other in order to get to the levels that we need. We're very aware that we also need male allies to do that as well. But it was predominantly Asma that
that's very powerful. Hugely powerful. I guess a slight, I don't know if it's a controversial question or not, but I suppose I wanted to sort of unpack a little bit why why is it even needed? And I think you know this. We talked about this before. I come from a business that has over 80% of women within our team, including our leadership team as well. So I'm kind of I'm aware, but it is a little bit alien to me as an individual, because. But I'd love to hear it from you. Why is it even needed in the first place?
I ask myself that question every day, and
Yeah,
I wish it wasn't needed, but
yeah,
unfortunately it is. We're in the 21st century, and in all honesty, we're not that much further than when the suffragettes were out there chaining themselves to the railings of Parliament, and women in the 60s burning their bras and things like that. Yeah, sure, we've got the vote, and sure, we have the right to equal pay.
yeah,
Whether we actually get that is a different ball game. And yes, we can go to the same colleges as men. So there are certainly massive cultural changes that have happened, but in certain areas, we are kind of still back in those days where the suffragettes would literally be looking at us and crying.
yeah,
So things like just practical examples. Numbers of women with Michelin stars. There are, women are 51% of this population.
yeah,
Women do most of the cooking
yeah,
in globally. Obviously there's loads of examples where men are the main cooks in the household, but globally,
yeah,
women do most of the household cooking, most of the cooking of the family. We're more than half of the population, and yet number of professional women cooks is a small percentage. I'm being kind of like optimistic here by saying 18% of women are in professional kitchens. 18%, considering our population, that we're 50% and we do most of the cooking. Why does that happen? Women with Michelin stars. There are probably about 200 people with Michelin stars in the UK. 18 of them are women.
right.
Again, stats that are like ridiculous. This year was the first time that a black woman in the UK got a Michelin star. The first time
Yeah,
since they've ever started. Even more shockingly, she's only the second black woman in the world
yeah,
to have a Michelin star.
yeah,
So this is why we are needed. The professional industry is really not where we should be. So the professional cooking industry and women working in professional kitchens are small proportions. And then even if you look at things like food production, and even in areas like sustainability, and in areas even like nutrition, where, as I said earlier, the numbers are probably skewed the other way. Nutrition is probably,
yeah,
I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but even anecdotally, you see a load more female nutritionists. But when you're looking at who the leaders are in that area and who the people are that you look up to in nutrition, it's predominantly men.
yeah,
People like Tim Spector,
yeah,
people like Michael Mosley.
yeah,
Try to name a positive role model for nutrition that's a woman, you'll be hard pressed. It's really the women are not leading these particular areas which we are so dependent on. Like even like health coaches and food coaches like Joe Wicks.
yeah,
In health, you don't see many women at the top of their game who are leading where the industry is going. It's just not done, and I don't know why. And that's why
that was going to be my next question. You thought, what what are some of the barriers, do you think? What are some of the obstacles, if you like, that are in the way that we need to remove to help drive towards
yeah
equality? I was going to say
yeah
get equality, but I mean even moving towards further towards equality would be
yeah
good, right?
exactly. Yeah, moving further towards equality would be great. It'd be good if there were more than 2 black women who've got Michelin stars in the world. That
Yeah,
that in itself is like the most shocking statistic that you can ever like think of, and it'd be good if there were more than 18 women in the UK with Michelin star chefs. Sorry, Michelin star chefs. But so okay, what can we do? The media, I think, have got quite a big role to play,
Right.
because normally when you see like an image of a kitchen and a and chefs working, it's predominantly men. Dramas, even with about the world. I mean, you could argue, yes, it's reflecting what's going on, but if it keeps reflecting what's going on, nothing will ever change.
No.
So the media, in my opinion, have got a responsibility to show that there are strong women out there who are, people like Asma Khan and people like Angela Hartnett and people like Claire Smith, who are running restaurants incredibly capably, who have got Michelin stars, who are at the top of their game, and are not just being seen in documentaries. They need to be seen wider across, across the media. So that would help for one. Obviously, women have children. Well, not all women have children, but when women decide to have children, that is probably where the main issues arise, because when they go back into the workplace, it's a rare company where the woman feels like she's gone back in exactly the same position and her career has not been hindered at all. Even when you look at things like maternity pay and leave and things like that, virtually every single woman that I've spoken to that has a child has felt that her career has not been the same when she's gone back into into any industry, really. It's not even just food we're talking about here. It's kind of every industry. So unless it's completely thrown the other way and a woman goes back and the man that if there is a male partner around, husband or the male partner decides to give up his career and do most of the main child rearing, that's kind of like the only way that a woman can go back in exactly the same position and stay in that position, because otherwise she's constantly juggling childcare, wanting to be a good mother, wanting to be a good person in her family, and yet wanting to have a career that allows her to do all of those other things, not be frowned upon or not be like, oh my God, are you going to your child's sports day? Oh my God, are you, has something happened that it means you've got to suddenly rush off, or you've got to leave early, or you can't come to the 7 o'clock in the morning meeting, or you can't, stay until like 12 o'clock at night. All these things which are thrown against women who are trying to kind of like rise up to successful positions, which are kind of looked at through a sort of a male lens, or from a lens that is like, we don't really care about your personal life. If you want to do well in this business, you've got to give your life to it. No one has to give their life to any business, in my career, in my opinion. And the minute companies stop acting like that, and we stop thinking that that's okay and that's the route to success, we're going to have this problem of women not being able to achieve their role, their role in the job, but also their role as good parents. So that's another area. I mean, it's something that I brought up in a panel that I was chairing at IFE not that long ago. Was things like, there can be more legal things put into place which can make it easier for women to succeed in certainly in large corporates. Okay, we've got things like maternity pay, but it's kind of not enough. We kind of need more childcare, or childcare that is cheaper, or why not have a creche in companies that are over a certain size? That would make things so much easier for hundreds of women. If a company was over a certain size, we're talking about big companies here, because obviously small companies can afford to do that. But a big company, who I am sure have got lots of spare office space since COVID, so many people are working from home, is why not have some sort of like government incentivized fresh scheme that is with companies of a certain size have to have a creche in their organization. because again, that would help women feel less guilty about leaving early. You know, all of these issues around childcare, the cost of childcare as well is somehow prohibitive, and often means that one member of the family has to decide to sacrifice their career to some extent.
Well, I mean, obviously policy is one way, but I'm also sure that there are some super progressive companies or businesses, at least out there, that have much more of a open and much more of an equal approach in their culture, I guess. Are there some examples of those that you've seen that are actually doing it really, really well, and almost a beacon of this is how it should be done?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some hospitality companies or restaurants that are doing that, mainly led by women, I must say.
Yeah.
But so, for example, Sally AB, who I actually used to work with at Great British Chefs, because she's a great chef that is she was part of the Ledbury, so she was part of the first pub to get a Michelin star under her stewardship. And Sally is now consultant chef at the Penn restaurant, which is part of Conrad St James's hotel chain. And it's called the Penn because it's basically around the corner from Parliament, and where one of the suffragettes, I'm not sure whether it's Emily, I'm not exactly sure which particular suffragette it was, but one of the suffragettes had the nickname Penn. So they called it on Penn because of that. So Sally is a massive cheerleader and spokesperson for equality in the restaurant. So she was married to a chef, and they, another Michelin star chef, but she was always aware that her kitchen, which is not completely female, but about 80% women in her restaurant. And at one time she had a female sommelier, female general manager, female, front of house. But what she does is she offers things like yoga and mental health training, and also, and certainly it's not an issue for her for a woman to decide, know that they need to leave early for whatever reasons to look after their children and stuff, and to have much more flexible in the shifts. So she's a great proponent of that, and in fact, look out for her in June, because she's releasing a memoir called A Woman's Places in the Kitchen. It's really based on her experience of being a woman in predominantly male-led kitchens, because she's worked with people like Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So she knows what it's like to be a woman in a busy restaurant, which is predominantly male and has a particularly macho male at the head. So I can't wait to read it. It's being sort of like touted as the female version of Kitchen Confidential. It's going to be a bit of an eye opener.
Yeah, well, can't wait.
But yeah, she's her restaurant. Chantal Nicholson.
I was just going to say Chantal Nicholson.
Yeah,
I was in a prison a couple of weeks ago, and actually we were at the chef's table downstairs, and just you're sitting there, you're looking into the kitchen, and it did dawn on me, and it's exactly the same. It wasn't exclusively female kitchen, but absolutely female led. I think there were one or two guys in there, but seven or eight women. And Chantal seems like a real driving force in that area as well.
Totally, yeah. I mean, again, Chantal was another inspiration, and if you look at our website, you will see that she's one of our cover girls along with Asma Khan. So Chantal's been like a huge supporter of ours. Literally, well, from when I was working at Great British Chefs, her cookbook was one of our cookbook club books of the month. But also, when I started Women in the Food Industry, or co-started Women in the Food Industry, she was a great supporter and was always singing our praises and helping us wherever she could. whether that was through interviews or doing panels or whatever. She's a great proponent, and another wonderful example to show how you don't need to be this big sort of like macho, shouty sort of extreme person to run a very successful kitchen.
Yeah,
you could be a normal, quietly spoken person that's just very good at their job and very good at looking after their staff, because obviously retention is a massive issue.
Massive issue.
For the industry. And if people are not treating their staff well, it's very easy for them at the moment to go off and find somewhere else where they will get treated better, because there is a huge shortage of good chefs in the UK at the moment because of things like Brexit and because of COVID. A lot of people during COVID discovered that they could work in other parts of the food industry and have a very comfortable life that was not, all of these awful long shifts and being shouted at. They could go and work for a food company and become a development chef and have a much I'm not saying easier time, but a much more kind of like normal time where they're not being shouted and screamed at, and or going to food production, or decide to become a private chef. The whole word of private chef, not an easy job, but much easier to control your time and to control your family around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, apart from equality, which I think absolutely should be a given, why do businesses that either are led by women or have more women in their leadership positions, why does that formula work for you in your experience?
I think it works, and in my experience and from talking to people that work for women-led companies and women who are women-led companies, is mainly because there's a bigger sense of empathy, and a sense of putting yourself into other people's shoes. It might sound ridiculous, and I'm sure all the men who are listening to this or watching this are going to say, well, I do that as well. But it really needs to be a real proper listen. And it needs to be a listen to that person can feel so comfortable that they can come and tell you anything and not feel worried about that. Now, if you're telling another woman why you can't come into work that day because of a bad period, or that's something that is quite difficult to say to another man and expect them to be like perfectly happy about it.
Empathetic.
Empathetic, exactly. So it's empathy. And it's the whole thing of knowing that woman has been through it. They're not just being empathetic because it's like the trendy thing to do. They're doing it because they're understanding that they've been through it themselves. They've had bad periods, and they've had they've been going through the menopause, or there are things which only women really understand those problems because they're lived experiences. I wouldn't claim to be like knowing how to, I don't know, having going through a male midlife crisis, because I don't know what that's like, and you wouldn't pretend to be able to understand that. But I do know what bad periods are like, and I do know what going through the menopause is like. They're very unique things to women, and other women obviously understand that, get that, and with the empathy can also get that. Women are also really good at nurturing and at like building people up and wanting to grow them, which is again is essential to every business. Because if we're not training our staff properly and not nurturing them and not giving someone a career path and a proper career trajectory, it's difficult to again hope that there are examples obviously of men that do have those qualities, and it's great that they do, but what we find is that predominantly, certainly within the restaurant world, a lot of those thoughts can go out of the window in other things that kind of take over, like the drive for wanting to get a Michelin star, or the drive for their restaurant wanting to be the best ever restaurant in the world. Women are kind of like less motivated by that, and are happier having a team of staff that they can rely on, a team of staff that they know will stay with them and will not nip off to other restaurants at the drop of a hat. There's a lot within the hospitality industry of people changing jobs very quickly, and even happened before COVID. And if you know that there's a proper career path ahead of you, you'd want to stay for longer than a year or longer than 2 years, and you wouldn't want to keep jumping around.
Yeah, exactly. What role then, leading on from that, what role can and should men play in women in the food industry?
We have lots of allies, and we're getting increasingly more, which is good. We would still love to have more men coming to our events, because our events are open to women as well as to men.
Yeah.
And what we tend to find is that predominantly 99% of the people that come to our events are women.
Yeah.
So, you know, even at IFE, the panel on women had of about 70 people in the audience. I think there were 2 men.
Yeah.
So, you know, we need men to be at events, not just our events, but at any event that is kind of like focused on women. But we need men to be there to be able to listen to what's going on and to try and understand and to see what we are, going through. And it's not like it's just, women moaning about being women. These are literally real things that are happening in the industry. So yes, more men coming to our events. We would like to have men trying to understand more about putting the importance of having other women in boards.
Yeah.
So, and again, not from a sort of like a tokenistic perspective, but to actually really want women who are doing well. I mean, we hear things about like the glass ceiling, but there's this awful phenomenon that I've heard of very recently called the glass cliff, which is where some companies are putting like women at the top of businesses which they know are kind of like not doing that well and are kind of like about to fail. So they'll throw in a woman so that they can tick off their, DEI or EDI initiatives. And then the woman's struggling with a business or a department that is just really, not doing very well. And it's like, oh, see, there's a woman in there.
Yeah.
And if you Google the glass cliff, you'll see kind of that's what it means, and you'll see awful examples of that taking place. Though I had only heard of it quite recently as well, but I've heard of. I knew that sort of thing's happening, but I didn't know that there was actually a term and a name for it. So we want way less of that. Just generally being amenable to cultural change, because that's difficult, always takes a long time. It's obviously helped by governmental things. So the more legal things that come into place, or the issues that or the things that come into place, which our friends in Nordic countries are really good at doing, is to, there are always other ways. There are always alternative ways of working, and these alternative ways of working are not bonkers and are not like bizarre, and they're happening in loads of Nordic countries, absolutely tons, where childcare is much cheaper, where childcare is seen as a as a right, and that it is just built in so many companies and so many organizations, many more than it is in this country.
I know we're talking about food and drink today, but I was doing a tour in London a couple of weeks ago, and we went to a magnificent wine bar actually called Lady of the Grapes, which features female winemakers, wine producers, and that's something that I hadn't seen before. And we got talking about that with this particular topic with the owner, and she felt that the wine industry was having having its sort of moment in terms of in the same way that we're talking about in perhaps more in food. Is that something that you see as well?
100%. So in fact, last week, Queen Wong, who runs Curious Vines, which is a community similar to ours, but it's just focused on women in the wine industry, and she runs amazing events which try to, again, basically do the sorts of things that we're doing for the food industry, but just specifically in wine. And she's run events about women writing in wine.
Yeah.
Whereas you would think, why on earth is that? What on earth could there be a problem? And that there's not diversity, and there are not as many women wine writers as there are men, and they're not getting equal pay. Surely women supposedly have better palates than men, and should be able to taste and certainly write about wine in exactly the same way as men. Again, if you look at the pay differentials in women wine writers, it's enormous. So go and have a look at Queena's site, Curious Vines. But specifically last week, she had carried out some research at the tail end of last year, proper quantified research with a food insights company, as a food and beverage insights company, about women in the wine industry, or the predominantly drinks industry. She spoke to 2,000 women, or interviews, surveys for 2,000 women. And 1 in 3 felt not safe at work. They felt that they had been harassed at work, and they felt that they had been also, had like inappropriate moves put towards them. Now we know it's the wine industry, and we know that if we look at globally, alcohol is kind of like a bit of a catalyst to that kind of behavior happening.
Yeah.
So it might be because of the industry that they're in, but that doesn't make it right. So she outlined this research at like I said, wasn't in the tail end of last year. It was earlier this year, and somebody wrote an article in the Times. A woman called Kate Spicer wrote a great article in the Times, and it was based on Queena's research, but also she actually spoke to, well, obviously Queena spoke to women as well, but interviewed people in this piece, women, about how they felt, whether they felt that the research was representative, and loads of women would report stories of their Me Too moments in the drinks industry. As a result of that, rather than Queena just saying, well, that's the research, end of story, she got together with 3 key bodies, the Drinks Trust and 2 other wine bodies, WSET and the other wine body whose name escapes me at the moment, WSPA, I believe. So 3 big drinks industry bodies to set up a advisory board to look into this and to try to change things. So last week at the Vintners Hall in London, about I'd say the numbers were probably about 70 of us, 70 people grouped up to talk about the findings, and to, it's all chaired by the Drinks Trust and WSTA, to talk about what next. And many people, not just women, many people who shared their experiences of diversity in general and inclusivity in general in the drinks industry. So we're talking about the LGBTQ community, neurodiverse community, Native Americans, all sorts of a mixture of people in the drinks trade were experiencing, and what we could do to try to turn those figures around that we have done all the research on. So if anyone is interested in joining the advisory board, because there's a board, well, the leaders of the board are from the Drinks Trust, and have a few other people in them, like Lorraine Coates from Be Inclusive in Hospitality, and there were a few other people that were going to sit on sort of like a smaller group, but a wider group is being sought. So if people from, and it was particularly apparent, obviously, that it's not just the drinks industry. The drinks industry is kind of like surprising now because it's being talked about, but obviously it's been going on for a long period of time, and obviously it goes on in the hospitality industry. And again, one of the reasons that Asper was a great inspiration was because she kind of outed someone who had a big, was at the center of a big Me Too case, but a big Me Too incident in 2018. So, yes, the drinks industry is definitely going through similar sorts of issues.
Yeah. How can people get involved, right? If you're in business, let's come at it from two different perspectives. If you're a guy listening to this, what should you do? And also, you're a woman listening to this. How do you kind of get, how does everyone kind of get involved, and how do we, I guess, start to propel? What would you want people to do? What's your call to action, I guess, if you like?
Yeah, to keep conversations going.
Yeah.
And to actively try to think of how can I make a difference?
Yeah.
And that actively, how can I make a difference is often through really such small things that you wouldn't believe. Like, kind of like going back to Asma's comment at the end, like there's a special place in hell for a woman, not at the end of the beginning of this conversation, a special place in hell for a woman that doesn't help another woman. Something that I try to do, and I'm not even sure who told me about doing this in the first place, but whenever I'm in a conversation with somebody or whenever I have a phone call, it's to try to recommend another woman somehow in your conversation, to try to bring up someone else who you feel is related to the conversation that you've been having with that person, or the Zoom that you've been having with that person, and say, oh, before I go, I wouldn't mind just talking about X, Y, Z, or that person, or that person's business, or that person's restaurant. And obviously, if it's more women talking about women, or if it's more people hearing about the wonderful things that other women are doing, like we've been speaking about Sally, Chantel, Asma, many other women who I can probably quote, but Queen Wong, all of these amazing people, women. It's to talk about them and to make sure that people know what they are doing. So the more women that get spoken about, the better. Other things that we can do are, I kind of like to make sure that whenever we do any form of recruitment, that in the decisions around that recruitment that we try to make them as diverse as possible.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't necessarily mean bringing more women in it. It means bringing in older people. It brings people with disabilities. It means bringing in neurodiverse people. Because neurodiverse people are remarkably obviously bright and intelligent people, but they feel that they are sometimes disadvantaged in large companies just because of the way they operate, which is completely obviously no fault of their own.
I think I'd also encourage, particularly, in our work, I guess we have a slightly different lens on the food industry. So we do a lot of work with insight teams, with product development teams, innovation teams, marketing teams. And I just feel like I work with incredible women every day. And not only in all different levels within organizations. Some incredible leaders in product development and innovation positions that are leading teams in retail and brands and so on, and almost inspire other women by telling those stories. I feel like inviting them all to kind of get in touch with you and tell those stories, but not only it's not only about preaching to the converted, but it's about spreading that message far beyond that, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's why we kind of want more men to come to events like that, or listen to our podcasts. We've done some podcasts with some incredible women as well. We were very lucky at the start to be able to interview Renee Elliott from Planet Organic. Again, a great leader, a great person to look up to, who's completely inspirational, who changed the face of organic food in the UK, back in the early 80s. So we're talking like a long time ago. And she was very generous with her time. And again, we were right at the start when she agreed to be interviewed. We spoke to also people again at the start. Juliet Barrett,
Mhm.
the former founder of Grenade Bars, which are, again, sold by millions, doing really well. But again, amazing woman who was probably one of the few women in boardrooms at the time around the whole health market. And but was doing did really well, and as I said, sold her business for quite a significant amount of money. And even so, and now we're speaking to people like Amanda Ross, who is the CEO and co-founder of Saturday Kitchen,
Yeah.
which is like probably the UK's biggest food show on Saturday mornings. Biggest one primetime food show. Has been running 17 years, and she's been co-founder and head of it for all those 17 years. And she's really good at putting women forward. Her production team is predominantly female. It's not completely female, but it's predominantly female. And she's a real, again, proponent of putting women forward. But she only wants to put women forward when she feels that they are kind of ready for it, and they are ready to take on a lot of flack that they would get from social media. Even now, which I find shocking.
Yeah.
It's just incredible that that social media is particularly places like, probably more so places like Twitter,
Yes.
where people can be a bit more anonymous.
Yeah.
And are just shocking, and treat women on shows like that in ways that they would never treat them, and speak about them in ways that they would never speak to in the same way about men. It's always phrases like, "Oh, who does she think she is? Oh, God, come on, love, heard enough of you now. Oh, my God, what are you wearing? What do you look like? Oh, stop being such a blabbermouth." All these things are always predominantly put towards women more so than men. And she, on our podcast, tells the story of when Angela Hart. So Angela Hart, 2 Michelin star chef. First time she's on Saturday Kitchen, Amanda said it took 17 seconds before somebody on Twitter said, "Oh, who does she think she is?"
No. Oh my goodness.
And you're like, "Hello,
Yeah.
she's Angela Hartman. That's who she is.
Yeah.
Have you got 2 Michelin stars?
Right.
Have some respect."
Yeah.
And we still, we see it now. Even last week, I think the week before last Saturday Kitchen, or week before last Saturday Kitchen, Mel B was on the show.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's not a chef. She's not a cook. But the levels of aggression that she was getting on Twitter for wanting to, she was being asked to tell her story, asked why she was on there. Basically, she's done great things for women, obviously girl power in itself. But she had a very, very, very bad marriage. She is now like a spokesperson for Women's Aid. And she spent some time talking about the marriage and why she was a spokesperson and whatever. Twitter was like, "Oh, stop talking about this. This is a food show. Why are you talking about your marriage? Why are you talking about this? Why are you talking about that?" It's like, because she was asked to talk about those things. And when is the right time to talk about your marriage? If you're invited to a show where you are a celebrity and you are the person that's been asked a question specifically about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because it happens to be a predominantly food show, but you've been asked that question, what's the problem?
Exactly.
And it was kind of shocking. And people were coming on and saying, "Oh my God, I wish I'd never come on Twitter to see all the comments, all the hate that Mel B's getting just because she's talking about her bad marriage."
Unreal.
Yeah. Anyway.
And my last question really is, what's next for women in the food industry? And you talked about, you said, come to our events. When's the next event? So
yeah. Well, our next couple of events, because we're getting towards the tail end of April now. So we have an event that we are running with Cookery Stall at Little Portland Street next Monday, and the Soil Association. It's on growing and urban growing, basically, in the city. So we have a wonderful lady who is the general manager of the Hackney School of Food.
Oh yeah,
doing great things to grow fruit and veg out in Hackney.
Yeah.
And they have loads of gardeners and female gardeners and female chefs and also male gardeners and chefs too. But they're doing great things with kids. It's kind of like in a similar sort of way to things that like chefs in schools do, but it's all out in Hackney and an area where you don't see a lot of green.
Yeah.
But particularly that part of Hackney, you don't see a lot of green. So anyway, she's on the panel. And we've also got a lovely lady from the Soil Association, running the Soil Association, who's going to talk about their Future of Food initiative as well. Yeah. And we also have we also have some guys on the panel who are from Wild West End, talking all about greening London and greening city spaces. And we also have a guy from Square Mile Farms, who's talking about vertical growing. So it'll be a great event. That's next Monday, the 29th of April at Goodway School at Portland Street. Any women in the food industry subscriber or anyone who subscribes to our mailing list can get tickets for £10. £15, but they're only £10. We are also doing a drinks free networking event at Conduit on the 1st of May.
Oh, wow.
Which is from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock. And it's just a general gathering about sustainability and food in general. Again, it's not specifically aimed at women. We welcome absolutely everybody, and it's just it's a networking event, but it's talking about how we can be more sustainable in restaurants. What sorts of things can we look for from our suppliers? How can we counter things like or buy and use sort of unseasonable food in a way that is still sustainable. So one of their suppliers is Angry Monk. I don't know if you know those guys. They are basically buying in wonky and otherwise surplus vegetables and fruit from places that would have not where that would have normally gone to landfill. So it means that they can buy in things like mangoes and not worry so much about, oh my God, we're buying in mangoes from, we're not staying British, but we actually are buying them because otherwise they would have just been thrown away.
Okay.
And even some of the stuff that they are doing. We've got a great the Conduit as well, great supplier called Citizens of Soil. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but it's a female. Well, it's co-run by a husband and wife team, and it's a cooperative of female olive oil farmers. And they're doing great things. So again, they supply olive oil to Conduit and to other people who buy the oil itself. They've got a subscription service to buy really good quality olive oil from female farms. So there are next couple of events that have been named, but I'm working on many more events.
It sounds like I can't really talk about them. Just go to the Women in the Food Industry website and sign up to the mailing list. And that will keep them up to date with your latest events, initiatives, podcasts, books, exciting stuff.
Great. Thanks so much, Charles. I really appreciate that.
No, honestly, no, it's super, super important. I actually feel like I work in a bit of a microcosm, really, because it's certainly opened my eyes as to actually what the reality is in certain other parts of the food industry.
So it is. It's kind of. I mean, that's why we always want to try and tell a positive story first, because it's a great industry to be in. It's a really creative industry. It's an industry that nurtures naturally because of the whole thing that it is. It's about feeding people. It's about
nourishment, caring.
Yeah, exactly. All of those are great qualities, and at the heart, everyone has those qualities. It's just sometimes when you are working in a busy, pressurized environment, or an environment where you are looking at figures all the time and you're looking at profits, sometimes those more humanistic elements of what food is about can get forgotten about. And what hospitality is about as well can get forgotten about, because you might be hospitable to your customers, but you're not necessarily being hospitable to your staff. And that's kind of in my opinion, key to hospitality in general.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Mex, look, that concludes this episode of the Food People in Conversation with Mex. On behalf of us all at the Food People and the In Conversation with audience, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your story, the women in the food industry story, and just go back really to that call to action and invite everybody to be open-minded, embrace it, and reflect on what you've talked about on why having more women within your business and in your leadership teams, why it works for everybody. Look, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real eye-opener and a real pleasure to talk to you, so thank you. So do join our TFP community for the details of our latest In Conversation with episodes, as well as our latest free-to-access food and drink trends foresight. Visit thefoodpeople.co.uk and complete your details at the footer of the page. On behalf of Mex and myself, thank you so much for listening to the Food People in Conversation with. Join with us in the trends of today and the foresight of tomorrow to shift the future of food and drink. And as always, leave you with one question, and that is to ask you, how are you shifting the future of food and drink? Thanks for listening.